When I bought my mountain cabin, I wasn't looking for luxury. I wasn't looking for status. I wasn't even looking for a vacation home. I was looking for peace. After 20 years working in IT security, spending most of my days solving other people's problems, I wanted one place where nobody could tell me what to do. The cabin sat near the edge of Pine Ridge Estates, a small mountain community tucked into the forests outside Denver. Most of the homes belonged to retirees. Some belonged to remote workers like me. A few were vacation properties owned by wealthy families who only visited during the summer. The views were incredible. The air smelled like pine trees. The nearest grocery store was 20 minutes away, and for the first 6 months, it felt like paradise. Then I met Karen Whitmore. Technically, her name wasn't Karen, but nobody in Pine Ridge called her anything else. She was president of the HOA. She treated the neighborhood like her personal kingdom, and she had a reputation. At first, I thought people were exaggerating. Every neighborhood had somebody who took rules too seriously. I figured she was just one of those people. Then she knocked on my door. The first complaint was about my mailbox. Apparently, the shade of brown I had chosen wasn't approved. The second complaint involved a bird feeder. The third involved my truck being visible from the road. Every conversation followed the same pattern. Karen would show up smiling. Then she'd start quoting HOA regulations. Then she'd threaten fines. Then she'd leave before I could finish responding. I tried being polite. I tried cooperating. I even attended HOA meetings. That was probably my biggest mistake, because that's when Karen became interested in me. One evening, after a meeting, she approached me in the parking lot. "You work with technology, right?" I nodded. "Cybersecurity." Her eyes lit up. "Oh, that's perfect." I immediately knew I wasn't going to like whatever came next. Karen explained that the HOA was considering upgrading neighborhood security. She wanted access control systems, digital gate management, community cameras, the works. Then she asked if I'd volunteer my time to set everything up. For free. I politely declined. I already worked 60 hours a week. My free time mattered. Karen didn't seem happy with my answer. The smile disappeared instantly. "Oh, well, that's disappointing." I shrugged. "I'm sure the HOA can hire a contractor." She forced another smile. "Of course." Then she walked away. That should have been the end of it. Instead, things got worse. Over the next few months, I received more violation notices than I'd gotten during my entire time living there. My trash can was visible for an extra hour after pickup. Violation. My outdoor lights were supposedly too bright. Violation. My deck furniture didn't match approved color guidelines. Violation. Every week brought something new. The fines weren't huge. $20 here, $50 there. But the pattern was obvious. Karen was targeting me. Most neighbors noticed it too. Several quietly mentioned it whenever we crossed paths. Nobody wanted to challenge her directly. She'd been HOA president for almost 8 years. People feared retaliation. I understood why. Then came the key incident. The thing that changed everything. It happened on a rainy Thursday afternoon. I was working from home when my doorbell rang. When I checked the camera feed, Karen stood outside with another HOA board member. I opened the door. "What can I do for you?" Karen smiled. "We need a copy of your cabin keys." I laughed. Honestly, I thought she was joking. She wasn't. The HOA board has voted to require emergency access for all homes. I stared at her. "What?" She handed me a printed document. According to the proposal, homeowners were expected to provide keys that would be stored in a lockbox managed by the HOA. Supposedly, this was for emergencies. Fire, flooding, property damage, things like that. I read the document twice. Then I looked up. "No." Karen blinked. No, you're not getting keys to my house." The other board member shifted awkwardly. Karen's smile tightened. "This is a community requirement." "No, it isn't." "It was approved by the board." "The board doesn't own my property." For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Karen folded her arms. "You're making this difficult." I laughed again. That only made her angrier. Finally, she turned and walked away. But before leaving, she stopped. "You'll regret refusing." The next morning, I found an official violation notice attached to my mailbox. Failure to comply with community safety requirements. Fine, $500. I couldn't believe it. I immediately contacted the HOA attorney. After several phone calls, I learned something interesting. The board had approved the policy, but nobody had verified whether it was actually enforceable. In fact, the attorney seemed surprised it had passed at all. The governing documents contained no provision requiring homeowners to surrender house keys. Legally, the HOA's position appeared shaky. I assumed that would settle things. I was wrong. Karen escalated. 2 weeks later, I returned home from a business trip and discovered workers inspecting the exterior of my cabin. I approached them. "Can I help you?" One of them pointed toward a clipboard. The HOA requested a property assessment. I immediately asked them to leave. They did. But the situation was becoming ridiculous. Then the police showed up. Not once. Twice. The first visit involved a complaint about abandoned vehicles. I own one truck. It wasn't abandoned. The second involved allegations that I was operating a commercial business from my home. Also false. The officers were professional, but the constant complaints were becoming exhausting. One officer actually apologized. "We've gotten multiple reports from the same source." I didn't need him to tell me who that source was. A week later, matters reached another level. I came home after dinner and noticed someone standing near my front porch. I stopped immediately. The figure turned. It was Karen. She wasn't alone. A police officer stood beside her. My stomach dropped. I walked over. The officer greeted me. Karen crossed her arms. The officer explained that the HOA had requested assistance regarding access concerns. I looked at him. "What access concerns?" Karen immediately jumped in. "He's refusing to provide emergency keys." The officer nodded. "She's saying the HOA requires access." I took a deep breath. Then I explained everything. The governing documents. The attorney. The unenforceable policy. The fines. The harassment. To my surprise, the officer seemed uncertain. Karen sensed it. She quickly produced a stack of paperwork. Most of it looked official. Board resolutions. Meeting minutes. Community notices. The officer spent several minutes reviewing everything. Then he looked at me. "I'm not saying you have to hand over your keys." I felt relief. For about 3 seconds. "But if this is a civil dispute governed by community regulations, you may need to resolve it through the HOA process." Karen smiled. A victorious smile. The kind of smile that said she thought she'd already won. The officer left shortly afterward. But the damage was done. Karen now believed law enforcement supported her position, and that made her dangerous. Over the next month, she became increasingly aggressive. Certified letters arrived weekly. Additional fines appeared. Board hearings were scheduled, then canceled, then rescheduled. Every interaction felt designed to wear me down. Most people would have eventually surrendered. That was Karen's strategy. Make life miserable until resistance seemed pointless. Unfortunately for her, I worked in cybersecurity. I understood access control better than anyone in the neighborhood. And one evening, after reviewing my security camera footage, I made a decision. If Karen was obsessed with keys, I would eliminate keys entirely. The project started small. A smart lock on the front door, then the back entrance, then the garage. Within weeks, every access point on the property had been upgraded. Fingerprint authentication, facial recognition, encrypted access logs, real-time alerts. No physical keys existed anymore. Not for daily use. Not for emergencies. Not for anyone, including me. The system recognized authorized faces and granted access automatically. Every entry was recorded. Every attempt was documented. Every interaction generated a timestamp. For the first time since moving to Pine Ridge Estates, I felt in control again. Then Karen discovered what I'd done, and her reaction was exactly what I expected. She lost her mind. The confrontation happened during an HOA meeting. More than 40 residents attended. Karen stood at the front of the room holding photographs of my newly installed security devices. Her face was red with anger. She accused me of undermining community safety. She accused me of creating security risks. She accused me of deliberately obstructing the HOA. The room erupted into arguments. Some residents supported her. Others openly defended me. For the first time in years, people were challenging Karen publicly, and she hated every second of it. Then she made a statement that instantly silenced the room. A statement that would change everything. She claimed the HOA had already obtained legal authorization to access my property if necessary. My heart skipped a beat, because if that was true, the situation had just become far more serious. But something about her expression bothered me. She wasn't confident. She looked nervous, almost desperate. As the meeting ended, several homeowners approached me privately. One of them handed me a folded document. Another quietly told me to check county records. A third warned me that Karen had been holding closed-door meetings with certain board members. Suddenly, This wasn't just about house keys anymore. Something larger was happening behind the scenes. Something involving the HOA leadership itself. That night, as I reviewed security alerts from my phone, a notification appeared. Motion detected. 11:43 p.m. Front porch. I opened the camera feed. The image loaded, and my blood ran cold. Someone was standing directly in front of my new Face ID lock, studying it, not trying to enter, not knocking, just staring at it, as if they were trying to figure out how to get past it. Then the person slowly looked up, directly into the camera, and smiled. The face was unmistakable. Karen. And in her hand was something that looked disturbingly similar to a set of lock-picking tools. That's when I realized the real battle hadn't even started yet. I stared at the camera feed for several seconds. Karen remained perfectly still. The porch light illuminated her face. One hand rested against the railing. The other held what appeared to be a small pouch containing metal tools. Then she looked directly into the camera again, almost like she wanted me to know she had been there. The video ended when she walked away. I replayed it 3 times. Every viewing made me angrier. Not because she had approached my property, but because she seemed completely convinced she could do whatever she wanted. The next morning, I downloaded the footage and saved multiple copies. Years in cybersecurity had taught me one lesson above all others. Documentation wins arguments. Evidence wins wars. I decided not to confront her immediately. Instead, I followed the advice I'd received at the HOA meeting. I started digging. The first stop was the county records office. What I found wasn't dramatic, at least not at first. Most documents were ordinary HOA paperwork, meeting minutes, budget approvals, community maintenance contracts. Then I noticed something strange. Several legal filings referenced emergency infrastructure access agreements. The agreements gave the HOA limited access rights to community-owned facilities, water pumps, electrical control panels, road maintenance equipment. Nothing unusual there, except one document had been amended. Twice. The wording had changed over the years, and one revision seemed suspiciously broad. It contained language that Karen had apparently been quoting during meetings. Language suggesting the HOA could enter private property during emergencies. The problem? The wording was incomplete. The actual document clearly limited those rights to specific community-owned equipment, not private homes, not residential cabins, not personal property. Karen had been presenting only part of the document, leaving out the sections that contradicted her claims. I printed everything. Then I contacted the HOA attorney again. This time, the conversation lasted nearly an hour. By the end of it, even he sounded frustrated. She's interpreting things very aggressively. That's one way to describe it. The attorney sighed. Off the record, several board members have raised concerns. That got my attention. What kind of concerns? He hesitated, then stopped himself. I can't discuss internal matters. That answer told me more than enough. Something was happening inside the HOA. Karen wasn't operating with unanimous support anymore. Over the following week, I began hearing rumors. Board members arguing. Residents demanding financial transparency. Questions about spending decisions. Questions about legal fees. Questions about projects that never seemed to get completed despite approved budgets. For the first time, Karen looked vulnerable, and the community noticed. Then came another surprise. One evening, a neighbor named Mark knocked on my door. Mark lived 3 houses away. Quiet guy, retired firefighter, the type of person who avoided drama whenever possible. He looked nervous. Can we talk? I invited him inside. We sat at the kitchen table. For several moments he said nothing. Then he slid a folder toward me. I think you should see this. Inside were copies of HOA emails. Dozens of them. Some involved board discussions. Others involved complaints. Several mentioned me specifically. I skimmed through the pages. My stomach tightened. Karen hadn't simply been enforcing rules. She had been actively encouraging residents to report me, searching for violations, creating investigations, looking for reasons to fine me. One email stood out. The message had been sent 6 months earlier, shortly after I declined her request to provide free security consulting. The wording was clear. She described me as uncooperative, then suggested increased compliance monitoring. I looked up. Mark nodded. Several people are tired of this. Why give these to me now? His answer was simple. Because she's getting worse. The following HOA meeting turned into chaos. Attendance was the highest anyone could remember. Nearly every seat was occupied. People lined the walls. Karen entered confidently. At least initially. That confidence lasted about 10 minutes. Then residents started asking questions. Real questions. Not the kind Karen could dismiss with a smile and a citation from the HOA handbook. Questions about legal expenses. Questions about fines. Questions about enforcement policies. Questions about why certain homeowners received dozens of violations while others received none. The room grew increasingly tense. Several board members looked uncomfortable. One refused to make eye contact with anyone. Then somebody mentioned the key policy. Suddenly, every conversation returned to the same issue. Why had Karen become so obsessed with gaining access to private homes? Her explanation sounded weaker every time she repeated it. Community safety, emergency preparedness, resident protection. The words felt rehearsed, and fewer people believed them. Then an elderly homeowner stood up. Her name was Margaret. She had lived in Pine Ridge longer than anyone. People respected her. When she spoke, everyone listened, including Karen. Margaret looked directly at the board. I've survived wildfires. I've survived blizzards. I've survived floods. She paused. Never once did I need the HOA holding keys to my home. The room erupted in applause. Karen's face turned bright red. The meeting ended without any resolution. But the atmosphere had changed. The fear was gone. Residents had finally started pushing back. A few days later, I received another security alert. This time it wasn't Karen. It was someone else. A man. Late at night. Standing near my garage. The cameras recorded everything. He never attempted entry. Never touched the property. But he spent several minutes examining the security system. Then he left. The next day, another camera captured a different individual. Different location. Same behavior. I reviewed all the footage carefully. Something wasn't right. People were paying unusual attention to my cabin. Far more attention than made sense. Then I remembered something Mark had mentioned. A planned HOA project. One Karen had been discussing privately. A proposal involving community-wide security upgrades. Access systems. Shared emergency management. Centralized monitoring. Suddenly, everything clicked. The key policy. The pressure campaign. The obsession with access. Karen hadn't simply wanted my keys. She wanted compliance. She wanted everyone to accept a system she could control. And my refusal had become a threat to that plan. Because if one homeowner successfully resisted, others might follow. Unfortunately for Karen, they already were. Within weeks, several residents publicly rejected the key policy. Others withdrew support for proposed security initiatives. The board became increasingly divided. Meanwhile, my Face ID system became something of a neighborhood legend. People started asking questions. How secure was it? How did it work? Could it really eliminate physical keys? Ironically, the same neighbors who once thought I was overreacting now wanted recommendations for their own homes. Karen absolutely hated that. Every conversation seemed to remind her she was losing influence. Then came the event that finally pushed everything over the edge. A special board meeting. Closed session. No homeowners allowed. Normally nobody would have cared. But word spread quickly. Several board members had apparently requested legal reviews. Others had demanded internal audits. Something significant was happening behind closed doors. For nearly 3 hours, the meeting continued. Residents gathered outside afterward waiting for answers. Karen eventually emerged. The confident woman who had spent years controlling Pine Ridge looked very different. Exhausted, angry, worried. She ignored every question, ignored every resident, ignored every reporter from the local paper, and drove away without saying a word. The next morning, rumors exploded throughout the neighborhood. Nobody knew exactly what had happened, only that multiple board members had challenged her authority, and that attorneys were now involved. As for me, I continued documenting everything. Every letter, every complaint, every camera alert, every interaction, because the situation still wasn't over. Not even close. 3 nights later, another notification appeared on my phone. Motion detected. Front entrance. I immediately opened the camera feed. The porch was empty. For a moment, I thought it was a false alert. Then movement appeared at the edge of the screen. A folded envelope. Someone had slid it beneath my door. I retrieved it cautiously. Inside was a single page. No signature. No identifying information. Just one sentence typed across the center. You've only uncovered part of what she's been doing. I read it twice. Then 3 times. Attached behind the note was a photocopy. A document I had never seen before. A document containing Karen's name. several board members' names, and references to properties throughout Pine Ridge Estates, including mine. As I sat alone at the kitchen table staring at the paperwork, one realization became impossible to ignore. The battle over my cabin keys had never really been about keys. It had been the first visible crack in something much larger, something hidden beneath years of HOA politics, years of intimidation, years of decisions nobody had questioned. Until now. Outside, the mountain wind rattled the pine trees. My phone buzzed again. Another security alert. Another camera notification. Another unexplained visitor near the property line. I looked toward the monitor, then back at the mysterious document. Whatever came next, one thing was certain. Karen Whitmore wasn't finished fighting, and neither was I.